By the end of 2026 or the beginning of 2027, according to Jake Claver, XRP will have reached $10,000 per coin. Additionally, he anticipates that XRP would reach $100 per coin by the year 2025's conclusion. He even went as far as to say that he is 99.9% certain that we will have reached $100 by the month's end. So I thought it would be a good day to go into further detail on Jake Claver's justifications for this. You didn't go into detail on the domino theory and the reverse carry trade, according to a few of you who commented on my previous video. That being said, I intend to do just that today. Please don't take my word for anything I write here. What follows is an analysis of the words spoken by Jake Claver, followed by a discussion of the likelihood based on the information we now possess. For sure, I'll be playing this clip. Listen closely. He explains in his own words why he believes that $10,000, $1,000, or $100 per XRP is possible. He thinks that, and I will explain his logic and the likelihood of it. Pay close attention. Please give me a brief rundown of the reverse carry trade. Extremely low interest rates, sometimes zero and even negative, have been maintained by the Bank of Japan for the past 2 decades. As absurd as it seems, they would actually pay you to take out a loan. But when you're in stagflation and hoping for economic growth, you'll very much stop at nothing to encourage people to take out loans and spend it. So this meant that many big pension funds, hedge funds, and other institutions with impeccable credit could borrow yen from the Bank of Japan, which they then exchanged for dollars or other currencies and used to invest in international markets. It was essentially free money that, depending on their technique and where they parked it, might earn 4, 5, 6, 10, or 20%. A large portion of those notes will need to be refinanced due to the ongoing increase in interest rates in Japan. The market dynamics have changed, currency and exchange rates are fluctuating, and the interest on those loans has increased significantly, rendering some of those trades that made sense when rates were low no longer viable. I simply wish to bring this to your attention. Nothing he has mentioned thus far is hypothetical. All of it is factual. Yes, interest rates have been raised by the Bank of Japan. Quantitative tightening is being implemented, for what seems like an eternity. They are essentially soaking up liquidity. Consequently, what he has stated thus far is accurate. Let him finish speaking before I provide some critique. But I do have a few things to say about what he is about to say. Because of this, every market throughout the world will experience a credit crunch and a liquidity crisis. You should therefore avoid being caught unawares. I hope you're not overly leveraged, and I also hope you're well positioned and invested in the proper assets. It would be fascinating for me to hear. I see. All right, I understand. All right, I'll fill you in on the details now. Very well, because we are here to discuss XRP and its implications. Isn't that the most crucial aspect? I don't understand how this goes. Doesn't this scenario with Japan set the stage for XRP to reach $10,000 per coin within the next year? You can get a decent explanation of this in this interview. Since the Bank of Japan has been doling out free money for quite some time, someone has to pay the price. This brings us to an intriguing alternative theory, the reverse carry trade. Give us your take on the reverse carry trade and how you think it will affect XRP and what future developments may result from it. The domino theory is what I call it. I released it a little over a year ago. It features a carriage rate that runs in the opposite direction. As a result, the Bank of Japan suddenly and dramatically raises interest rates. What would set things in motion? The oil. My prediction is that oil prices will rise, which would have a negative impact on Japan's energy budget and force the country to raise interest rates to curb inflation. If that were to happen, it would be an intriguing possibility to consider, given that the United States has bailed out the Bank of Japan on many occasions, primarily to assist. The reason behind their efforts to keep interest rates low is clear. When those notes started coming due, most of the holdings would be in bonds and treasuries, which would lead to their immediate sale from the U.S. economy. This is why the reverse carry trade exists. How can we prevent a devastating impact on our bonds and treasury bills in the event of a reverse carry trade and an interest rate increase in Japan? It would be absolutely disastrous. Could you perhaps explain what could replace that? Thus, the Brilliant Act has already backfired on them. So, assuming the current level of outstanding foreign debt were to flood the market, the projected volume of stable coins to be created is around $2.3 trillion. After it is set up and these banks are prepared to issue stable coins, the desire for them to do so will be driven domestically in the US, and they will purchase the treasuries that come onto the market. The bond market would then be stabilized. All right, you stable coins such RL, USD, and USDC, and so on are all being backed equally by US Treasuries. You may say that's the safety net you're referring to. Also, the yen would be aggressively rising in value relative to the dollar. The same goes for various forms of money. For those who are selling their holdings in other currencies, the only way to repay their loans would be to use foreign exchange to swap back to the yen. Okay, so that's the FX. I see. You do begin to understand the picture now, don't you? In order to make this massive transfer of your wealth possible, stablecoins will essentially be required. And he's basically bringing up the Genius Act to justify his belief that XRP would benefit greatly from this, pointing to RLUSD as the rationale. Naturally, RLUSD will be the one to implement all of these changes. However, I believe this is when it begins to fall apart slightly, correct? Because to start, the RLUSD coin isn't the only stable coin out there. There are a plethora of others that are both more popular and more developed. I mean, the Trump government is issuing its own stable coin, isn't that right? In comparison to RLUSD, USTT and USCD have been around for a lot longer and have a lot more users. As Jake Claver has stated time and time again, the main premise here is that RLUSD would be the only one utilized in this scenario, which would enable XRP to reach $10,000 per coin. The problem with that is that there is absolutely no proof that it is true. And this is when I start to feel a bit uneasy, isn't it? According to him, he is in touch with some very rich people and they are talking to him about something. He isn't allowed to say much about it due to confidentiality concerns, but he does know that it will work. And he says he better be prepared for it. He basically says this in all of his messages. This is a typical X post from him. He's talking about the 10-year government bond rate in Japan and how it's rising again, exactly like it did in 2005. The scapegoat, he says, is on the way. All things considered, this is going to serve as the initial spark. That's going to be the final nail in the coffin. Also, this is the initial stage. Therefore, I genuinely wish to comprehend it thoroughly. Correct? In his hypothetical yen carry trade, investors sell foreign assets to pay back yen borrowing. $1 trillion worth of global liquidity might evaporate as the yen advances, leading to massive market crashes, shocks to deflation, and delays in settlement in traditional banking. A massive crash is probably in the cards. This is all to suggest that XRP will replace all other standards and that RLUSD will enable transactions totaling trillions of dollars, so rescuing the global economy remains entirely conjectural. Additionally, I would like to emphasize that I completely endorse the idea of this taking place. It is my deepest desire that this transpire. I simply think it's incredibly risky to offer this idea to people who might not be ready if XRP has a major pullback and isn't the one utilized to settle all of this during a time of potential massive economic shock, which I think is very likely. That being said, we should all be ready for the chance that it might not be. As he has stated in numerous videos, Claver's fundamental belief is that capital fleeing conventional wisdom will not simply pour into Bitcoin as gold as it has in the past, but will instead seek refuge in XRP for institutional settlement and liquidity sourcing. There will be a tremendous demand for XRP and a very restricted supply due to catalysts such as the XRP ETF absorbing supply, XRP upgrades, and tokenized real-world assets. So basically, depending on the situation, he has made a wide range of price projections. He predicted a range of $1,000 to $2,000 by the beginning of 2026. In the most catastrophic unwind situations, he has mentioned $750 or more. In late 2025, I'll buy XRP for $1,000 if it causes a perfect storm. On other occasions, he has also stated this: rising Japanese rates set off the initial domino effect, which is then shifted in response to policy moves at the Bank of Japan. This leads to a lack of liquidity on a worldwide scale, which in turn generates market crashes and the eventual collapse or distrust of stable coins such as USDT. The collapse of USDT, USDC, and all these other stable coins is a key component of Jay Claver's theory. The collapse of even Trump's own stable coin, USD1, issued by World Liberty Financial, would be a part of it. When governments and institutions have an immediate need for a neutral, instantaneous source of liquidity, XRP appears, and it's the answer, isn't it? Since this is all conjectural, isn't it? It is highly speculative to claim that all other stable coins will be distrusted or collapse, and then to suggest that stable coins themselves will be affected by this liquidity crisis. It's highly hypothetical. Nothing can be done to avoid it. Nothing suggests that any of this will really happen. If Jay Claver is correct, we can overcome all of these obstacles, and then it will be XRP. I would be really thrilled if that could happen again. The future of XRP is bright, I must say. However, this presupposes that people forego the usage of any other stable coins in favor of XRPL. Furthermore, unlike in every previous instance, they do not just print an enormous amount of money and rescue the Japanese bank, and that's presuming that XRP is the preferred cryptocurrency instead of gold or Bitcoin. Not to mention how unusual it is when it comes to investing. It's very unlikely that any one asset class will experience a perfect storm. For example, when exactly did gold begin to rise while silver remained stagnant? Could you tell me when it started that people over the world started purchasing Bitcoin but not gold? I mean, when exactly did the global public start to lose interest in gold and start pouring their money into cryptocurrency? The United States has always printed extra money and bailed people out in times like these. When did they stop doing that? So, my firm belief is that the Japanese economy will collapse after the Bank of Japan either raises interest rates or implements quantitative tightening.